It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Howdy-howdy-o, hey. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are ya? We've got a very full show today, so not a lot of time to dilly-dally, as my grandmother used to say. Don't dilly-dally. I don't hear anybody saying that anymore. I think that one, last usage of dilly-dally was probably in 1964. And that was about it. And I don't think anybody's used that phrase ever again. At least I haven't heard it. We've got two interviews today. Two full interviews. First up is Richard Keller, who is an author and a publisher. His publishing company is called Wooden Pants Publishing. And he also does some podcasts, one called Between the Pages and The Leap, which I had the privilege of being a guest on The Leap not too long ago. Richard is up first, then followed by former entertainment attorney turned photographer, Peter Alessandria. And Peter's got a very interesting story, similar to my own. Not exactly, but kind of, sort of, in the sense that he had a complete life course change at his midpoint in his life and went from an attorney to being a photographer. And now he is a happier man for doing it. So we will hear his story. So, no dilly-dallying, and we will be right back with Richard Keller. Okay, please welcome my guest now, Richard Keller. Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. You are, what do you call yourself? An author? Publisher?
I would be called an author / parallel entrepreneur, I guess.
Parallel entrepreneur. What does that mean?
I have my hands in multiple projects at this time. So if one isn't making the necessary funds, I can utilize the other talents I have to, pick up the slack.
I've never heard the term parallel entrepreneur, but I have heard the term spherical entrepreneur.
The only reason I call it parallel entrepreneur is because they're all going on at the same time. I've heard the term serial entrepreneur, which is not my case because it's not something where I'm waiting for one project to be sold or fail in order to start up another one. It's more of I'm working toward getting multiple ones up and running and maintaining them and keeping them, not selling them off.
So tell us just a little bit about what you've been doing with your life so far. And then we'll get into your, you've got a couple of podcasts that you do, right?
I do, yes.
Okay.
So the major thing is I'm a father of 5 children, 4 of them girls. So 99.9% of my time is taken up with that. The remaining 1% is taken up with a couple of things. I own a publishing company called Wooden Pants Publishing, and we release books for all genres as well as both fiction and nonfiction. We try to get authors who are willing to give us a more spiritual or uplifting look at life as opposed to dark and dystopian, because life is like that in general. We don't need people to delve into it anymore. And then I have a media line under Wooden Pants where I host 2 podcasts. One is called The Daily Author, and it's a Monday through Friday show for all things literary. And then I have a weekly podcast called The Leap, which talks to people about their life and creative changes. So, for example, as we're talking on my episode tomorrow, I interview my brother, who not only made a leap out of technology into freelance writing, but made a life leap to adopt a child. They're part of the Wooden Pants Network, which is a virtual or an online radio network. And then I have a talk show I do every other Sunday on a radio station where I live in Fort Collins called Between the Pages, where I talk to local literary talent about their works, because they always need a location to promote themselves, and doing it on the radio is one of the best places to do that. And then I have a creative services line as well, where I help people engineer their audiobooks, narrate their audiobooks. I edit books, anything that is related in connection to publishing. So that's it. Thanks for having me on.
I'm curious about publishing, about literature publishing. Why would somebody need a publisher now when you can put all your stuff up on Amazon yourself?
That's a really common question. The answer is the role of an independent author is still not recognized by other people out there. So, for instance, Barnes & Noble and other independent bookstores will not put your book on the shelf a lot of times if you are just published on Amazon. By getting a publisher, you're getting that extra level of, I guess, being able to multitask. Instead of handling all of the marketing and the social media and setting up of the of workshops and things like that, the author can continue to write while we do the editing, while we do the formatting, while we cover design, while we do the distribution to all of the different outlets, while we do the social media and other promotion. It helps them continue their creativity pattern and not let it be interrupted by the, I guess, menial tasks that go along with it. Many authors and many creatives love to do the writing and the art and the music. They don't like to do the marketing part of it, which is the most important part of it, because if you don't market, nobody is going to know about your stuff.
Well, that's very true. And actually, a lot of creative people aren't very good at the business side.
No, because, and I've noticed this as well, and it takes time to develop it as a creative person. When you're a creative person, when you have a creative soul, you tend to get bored a lot. So you may end up tiring of one project and then going and doing something else. But if you want to monetize your creativity, which is possible, you have to start developing that business side of it. You have to understand that you can't just stop doing it and focus on something else because you're getting bored. You have to complete the, I guess, process, the list, in order for things to start happening for you.
I know what you mean about creative people can kind of jump from one idea to another, to another, to another. In business, you can't do that, right? You really got to follow through. The one thing I've noticed with this radio show, we get a lot of submissions from indie musicians, and so much of it is DIY now because of the technology, where they're doing everything. They created the song, they recorded the song, they produced the song, and now they're trying to market it. I've found that there is, now not always, this is a generalization, it's not, for everybody, but I've found that the ones that aren't quite as good musically are the ones that are really good with the social media and the marketing and the promotion. There seems to be sort of a balance where the ones that are super, super talented, the kind that just, you hear the song and you go, whoa, those people are kind of hard to find. I mean, those songs I will get from a manager. or from a publicist. And the artists, they don't do anything like that. I had one guy who was an incredible rock and roll player and singer. He didn't even have a Facebook or a Twitter account at this point. And I thought that was sort of sacrilegious because it's sort of like, how are you going to get out there if nobody can see you online? But he was still doing it the old-fashioned way, and I don't know. I'm not sure that that's the best idea in the world, but...
I agree with you. I have a number of authors who do not have social media accounts, and that is a disadvantage to them because it diminishes the amount of marketing that they can do.
Right.
Yes, they can go out and do readings. Yes, they can send it out to their friends and family. But how are other people going to know where it is on Amazon and how to pick it up? At least you have to have a website for it so that people can know, oh, well, if we're talking about musicians, oh, well, my music's on Bandcamp, my music's on SoundCloud, and this is where you can go and get it, and here are my performances. At least that's where you can do it.
Right.
Social media is great because it's that next level of personalization that they get to know you. They get to know your other thoughts. Yes, now at the end of 2016, in the beginning of 2017, social media is, sometimes you want to turn it off and say, just leave me alone. But for the most part, it still works by getting your name out there. When I put out a promotion for one of my books, it gets picked up by one of my authors, it gets shared, gets retweeted, and that increases the likes or even the followers for everybody across the board. It's a cascading effect. And by not doing that, by not going on at least a Pinterest or an Instagram, you're not taking advantage of the other people out there who are maybe dying for something that you produce.
Well, that's very true. And social media and the internet in general does a lot of the legwork for you that wasn't possible before the internet. You know, this is not really a new phenomenon. It's people who resist technology. And it's been going on in the music industry forever. I mean, I read stories about jazz players back in the 1920s who refused to record music when, records were just in their infancy. And they said, oh, no, I'm never going to have any of my songs recorded ever because then people can copy them. And that was their justification. So the only way you could ever hear these people is you had to go see them live. Mm-hmm. Now, I kind of get that, I don't know if you want to call it arrogance, but protection of their material. However, by having it recorded, you open up a whole new market of people buying your records.
Right.
Which I think they missed the boat on that. And it's the same thing with social media. Now, 500 people can look at you, where before they had to go to the bookstore or to the record shop to find your record, if they've even heard of you.
I think there's a certain group of creatives who do it just to do it. They like the purity of it. They'll write a book just to write the book, to get the story out there, and they won't care to monetize it. Same thing with musicians. There are plenty of musicians who do wonderful work in clubs and other outlets who just perform. They don't want other people to hear their work through social media or through technology because they feel that maybe that purity is tainted in some way. And I think that's what makes creatives very unique, that on the one hand, they do want to see their recognition. But on the other hand, they want to keep the work as pure as possible. And by doing that, they decide to kind of shun social media, shun technology in order to let it happen. And in the end, some of them still remain quite successful or, even not successful, their spirit is happy. They have abundance. They have abundance of their creativity. They have abundance, and whatever they need is there for them. They're not looking for the $1 million. They're not looking for the national success. They're just happy that they're able to do this on a regular basis.
Well, right. And I think one of the pieces of advice that I've given to starting up musicians, I'm a musician. I have been for 30 some odd years. This radio show actually came out of, that's a whole nother story, but the radio show came out of my desire to promote my music. And then the show took off rather than the music. So I just kept with the show, but it's a great way to connect with people, and I'm helping other indie artists get some exposure. My point is that the advice that I have given is you have to decide whether or not you want to do this just to be creative, like you said, or do you want to do it for a living? Because it changes the whole dynamic if you want to do it for a living.
Yeah.
Then you've got to do social media. And that's why I was a little perplexed about this guy I was talking about earlier, was that he was doing this for a living, but he didn't have a Facebook or a Twitter account. And his music was fabulous. He did have a manager, but I thought, the manager should have insisted that he set up an account, because when I had him on the show, I was looking for him because we use social media to promote the episode of the show. I couldn't tag him, because he wasn't there. He didn't exist. So I just felt like he kind of lost out on a potential exposure by not having that, because then anybody who was listening to the show couldn't go online and look him up and look for his music. So I thought it was a little bit too bad.
I agree.
Horses for courses, I guess. The other thing on your bio that I thought was interesting is it says you like to read, travel, spend time with family, and nap.
The nap.
Yeah, I'm a big nap fan because I work all kinds of weird hours. So for me, it's like I like that little break in between the day rather than going through the entire day awake and then sleeping for 8 hours. I have a hard time sleeping for 8 hours. I can sleep for 4 or 5. So a nap for an hour or two during the day is great, Mm-hmm. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, this is something I've noticed as I've gone on here. It's that my brain will shut down at some point in time, and I won't be able to do, even though I try to do something, it'll be like, no, you can't do anything anymore. By taking a nap, even if it's 20 minutes, that it just says, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's move to the next thing. And if you can't nap, even if you just close your eyes and focus on your breathing, that will give you a recharge to do it. 1 to 2 hours is good enough for napping. If you nap any more than that, then your day is shot.
I agree, because it's hard to get going again. You go too deep into sleep. I like to meditate to the point where I lie down and just shut the chatter off in my brain. And you get to that, I don't know what it's called. I'll call it the twilight zone, where you're almost asleep, but you're not quite in a deep, deep sleep. You're not in REM sleep. But it's that point where you're not conscious of any thought, yet your subconscious is still picking up any noise and things in the room. You're in that half state. If I can go into the half state for an hour, I come out feeling fabulous, ready to go, like you said, recharged. Better than if I go into a deep sleep, because then it's the whole process of getting up, making tea, and waking up all over again. It's like mourning twice in a day,
Yeah, and then it's hard to really get your brain motivated, and if it's later in the day, then your day is just totally shot.
Yeah, I agree. Where have you traveled? You said you like to travel on this.
Well, I've traveled most of the United States. In fact, we went on a cross-country trip because we live in Colorado. We used to live on the East Coast. My family and I took a cross-country trip last year via car, or earlier in March of 2016 via car. So I love to travel to any place, really. I've been to most of the states in the U.S. I've been to Canada. I love Toronto. I've been to Seattle. I've been to California, Los Angeles, and Disneyland. Of course, San Diego is a great town. Las Vegas is my favorite. I do enjoy going there. It's really close to where I live, and it's, even though the food and everything expensive, the rooms are cheap, and it's that good break for an adult to kind of just be there, and just especially creative, to surround yourself with all the craziness because it brings out so many ideas. A few years ago, I went to Costa Rica on a kind of a mission/service trip, and that was one of my favorite trips. I truly enjoyed it. It was my first time really out of the country, within the United States area, and just looking at the changes in Costa Rica and talking to the people was just so enriching for me and recharging for me. It's one of those places that I would consider moving at some point in time to the nice, calm, warmer waters of the Pacific instead of the other side, because that can get very rainy. And it's modern enough, yet it's rural enough that everything kind of mixes together.
You said Costa Rica? I'm trying to think on the map where that is.
It's around El Salvador. It's around Nicaragua.
Central America.
Yeah, Central America. It's north of Panama.
North of Panama. Okay.
Yes.
So the weather there is pretty much tropical, humid.
Oh, yeah. The only
round.
thing I didn't like about it is because it's right about at the equator, there you don't have a period where it's, a longer night and a shorter morning or something like that. It gets light at 6 o'clock in the morning and gets dark at 6 o'clock at night, and that's it.
And it stays, and they don't do daylight savings time, probably.
No, they do not do daylight savings time, and that's the way it is, year from year to year. I mean, from day to day, it never changes.
I did want to ask you something about your publishing company. If
Yes.
somebody was going to, let's say you had a potential client, how does that work? Do you just take a cut, or do they pay up front for your services?
No, we do an upfront, and this allows a couple of things. One, gives me an opportunity to have a roof over my head and feed the kids. Two, it allows the people I work with to do their job and for me to pay them to do their job. And then it gives the author the ability to receive 100% worth of royalties from all sales, regardless if they're online, from the bookstore, or their personal sales. I think that's, right now, it's a much better way to do it than some of the older models where they're taking a cut. Because even with Amazon, the royalties that some people receive are very small as opposed to, getting the whole thing. So even if they get $5.84 of a royalty per book, and I take 60% of that, they're still only getting $2 for it. If they invest ahead of time, that gives them the ability to make that money up. Is it going to happen in the first month? We can only hope. But it'll happen at some point in time that they will break even and go beyond that. I've actually had a number of authors who have made significant amounts of money off of their sales that they have either broke even or they have excelled at this point in time.
I think it's going that way. It's going that direction.
Right.
Music publishers are doing the same thing now. They're taking fees, rather than commission.
And I think, I don't want to say I'm the next generation, or people who also do my stuff are in the next generation of the publishing, but I think that is the case. More and more of the publishers, even the big publishers, are pulling back from a lot of the things that they're doing and they're giving it to the author to accomplish, especially marketing. These upfront fee programs are becoming more of the norm because authors are seeing the potential down the line. Plus, they're seeing that their books are going to be published quicker than 18 to 24 months. For example, my books turn around within 90 to 120 days, depending on the progress and the agreement of the author.
You don't have to do print necessarily, though.
No,
paperbacks or hardbacks.
No, you don't. People have made plenty of money on ebooks alone. The advantage of print books is people still want to have it in their hands. People still want to do that. Not everybody is into reading it through their phone or a tablet. I'm going to be 48 years old. I have problems reading things on my phone, and I have bifocals. People still want that book, so they have an opportunity to kind of, take it where they want to go and not have to take an electronic with them.
Right. Well, I definitely am one of those. When I go on the plane, I will bring a paperback because the phone is, quite frankly, is too small. And if you zoom the text in, you can get maybe 5 or 6 words on the screen, which is really annoying to keep flipping up and up and up. And I don't feel like bringing a special pad just for the book and another plug. So I always take paperback. Plus, with the radio show, all the authors that I've had on have sent me signed copies of their books. That's nice to have just, as a souvenir of their appearance on the show. So when I take those books, I've got a whole stack of them that I've been trying to get through. And if I fly somewhere, that's usually when I will take the book. At home, I don't mind reading off of, like a 27-inch monitor because you can get, 2 pages on that. So I don't mind reading that way, but anything smaller, I don't really like it. Well, okay, Richard, we have kind of run out of time here. Do you have a website for your publishing in case we have any authors who might be interested in your services? Absolutely.
You go to www.woodenpantspub, that's WOODENPANTSPUB.com. There's information on our packages, information on our media programs, information on our programs like the Young Writers Program. You can see our books there as well. You can also go to blogtalkradio.com/woodenpantsnetwork for our 2 podcasts, The Leap and The Daily Author. And if you're interested in supporting other creative entrepreneurs and maintaining the productivity of Wooden Pants, you can go to our GoFundMe page, which is gofundme.com/frustratedentrepreneur.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. It was nice talking to you. Interesting chat.
Nice talking to you. Thank you for having me.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's eppsproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me this spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Wrong hat.
I take a 7.5.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome my guest, Peter Alessandria. Hi, Peter. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Douglas. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. When I read through your bio, it was very interesting because it's similar to mine. I mean, not identical, but the kind of changing course in midlife, that was very similar to what I did. So I was intrigued by your bio and wanted to hear all about your story. So before we get to your transition and your photography, give us a little background on yourself, please, and then we'll talk about your photography.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. I did have a look at your bio as well, and I did notice that similarity. So,
okay.
I'm a guy from New York City. I grew up in the New York City area, Queens, Long Island. I went to college in upstate New York, and I studied economics and business. And then basically, I didn't want to get a job after college, so I went to law school in Buffalo, New York. And I did a joint JD MBA program while I was there. And what was interesting was 1 year, I think it was my second or third year up there, a friend of mine who I had gone to college with was going to law school in San Diego. And so he invited me to come out and visit him. And I had never been to California before. And so I got on the plane in Buffalo. It was late February, and there was a foot of snow, and it was 20-something degrees. And I got off the plane in San Diego, and it was about 75 degrees and sunny, and he pulled up in a convertible. And as I said, I'd never been to California before. And I just looked at him and I said, my God, you live this way? And that kind of sold me on the idea of California. So after I graduated from law school, I bought a one-way plane ticket for Los Angeles, found a job with a law firm out there, and I wanted to get into entertainment law. And there were no entertainment law classes in Buffalo, and so what I did was I began to read every contract that I could get my hands on in the entertainment business. So that was film production, TV production, and also something you know a little bit about, the music industry. And I would read recording contracts and publishing agreements, and then on the production side, film and TV, I would read the financing distribution agreements, the talent deals, with the writers, the actors, even the option agreements for the screenplays and all that. And that's basically how I learned entertainment law. And then what I did, I was at that law firm for a couple of years, and then I went in-house with some film and TV production companies. They were very small companies, basically independent companies, and they were doing, what you might call direct-to-video productions and some syndicated television shows. But what happened was I got to see how, I worked on the contracts for those companies, and then I got to go on the movie sets where they were making the film and TV productions, and I got to see how the production process worked. And that was very interesting to me. I didn't really know anything about it prior to that. And I'll never forget one of the first days of production on this film project. I showed up on the set, and I had read the script, so I knew the story. And it turned out they were filming the last scene of the movie on the first day of production. So that was kind of a revelation to me. I didn't really know how the whole process worked, and I soon became interested in, lighting and camera angles and all of that. And this was probably in the 1990s, the mid-1990s, and the independent film world was coming up. And things like Sundance the Sundance Film Festival really put the independent film world on the map. And you go to your local art house theater in, some small town, and you could see an independent film there. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was explore my creativity, and I became an amateur filmmaker in addition to being an attorney. And I wrote, produced, and directed 7 short films. Now, they technically weren't films because at the same time, what was happening was the rise of digital video. And I know I listened to one of your interviews this week with a filmmaker and you were asking about the difference between film and video. I got to see firsthand the benefit of the digital video production. Now, it wasn't as good back then as it is now, but the beautiful thing was, for the price of a camcorder, I could actually go out and make a movie, and I was able to do that. And that was great. I really enjoyed that. I liked working with actors. I liked having a concept in my mind for a movie and writing the screenplay, and then finding locations and rehearsing and all that stuff. That was great. And they were just little, 5-minute kind of little goofy films. They didn't really go anywhere, but it was the first time I had explored that part of my creativity. And then shortly thereafter, I picked up it was about the same time that the digital SLRs were coming out. So those were still cameras with the interchangeable lenses, but they had a digital sensor in them as well. And I picked up one of those, still camera, and I just fell in love. I just completely fell in love with photography. So that's kind of the beginning of all that.
So what was it that you liked about photography versus film, motion pictures? Why did still photography excite you more than making films?
Well, I still enjoy the filmmaking process, and I'm actually looking to get back into it a little bit. But the big thing was, it took three months to make a movie, and I could do a photo shoot in an afternoon. It was it was less labor intensive. There was more opportunities, more subject matter that I could photograph. I mean, I photograph everything from still life to landscapes to cityscapes to people, portraits and headshots and all that. So I guess it was just more,
instant gratification.
Yeah, I don't like to use that word, but it was just easier, and it had its own allure to me. I can't really explain it other than that.
Now, when you were a kid, did you have any creative outlets or, I don't want to say inklings, but, did you have any kind of creative thing that you were doing? Did you sing? Did you dance? Did you act? Did you have any sort of inclination that you were going to go that way, or none at all? And this came later in your life.
Well, that's why I mentioned, I had none of that as a kid. And that's why when I say I went to college, I studied economics and business. When I went to, then I went to law school, I got my MBA. I never even took an art appreciation class. I didn't know anything about art. I didn't know anything about photography. I certainly didn't know anything about filmmaking. So it was definitely something that came to me. I was in my late 30s when I finally found my passion, which was really interesting.
But it was a passion you didn't know you had, it sounds like.
No, I was clueless.
That's what I find intriguing about it, because a lot of people have the desire and the talent perhaps at a very young age. And like me, I got diverted onto a different road because of life situations. And, a lot of people, it's finance. They can't afford to be an artist. But with you kind of did it the other way around. You sort of discovered your passion after, which I find interesting. It wasn't like you had it, put it on hold, went and did a career, and then came back to it. That's what I did. You just sort of discovered it right at whatever age you were. You were 40-something?
Yeah, my late 30s.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it was, like I said, I think it was working for those companies as an attorney and showing up on those film sets and meeting some of the people and just seeing that for the first time. I think that just really sparked something in me, and it was, it was pretty prevalent. It wasn't like this on the East Coast, at least not then, but in Los Angeles, the independent film world was very, very robust. And there were groups that supported independent filmmakers, that provided space, equipment rentals. I mean, all that stuff. It was very conducive to exploring that. And, everybody in Los Angeles has a script. Everybody's an actor, so I was around that. And I just think that stirred something in me that I didn't know I had.
Yeah, one of the guests I had on said something about if you go to any upscale restaurant in L.A., and you ask the waiter, how's your screenplay going? They'll have an answer for you, because they're all doing it, but most of them are working as waiters to support themselves. Now, what year was it that you did that?
In terms of what? The switch to...
No, in terms of going and seeing how films were made and getting intrigued by it.
I think it was early 90s.
Okay.
93, 94.
Well, I'm just curious because that would have been, you would have got in at the right time where it was just starting to go over to digital and there was a whole new market sort of emerging from there. So you were kind of in it at the right time to see it.
Yeah, that's the rise of video. Now, again, I mean, it's come a long way. I think in some ways now I still know about filmmaking and digital technology and all that. I think we can say that we have gotten to the point where digital technology equals or exceeds what you could get with film. It may not be the exact same look, although even that they've been able to emulate, but things like dynamic range, resolution and all that, I mean, the technology has gotten really good. It wasn't like that back then. The stuff I did, and some of it's still up on YouTube, by the way, and, you could see it was video. It wasn't great looking, but, again, it was something I could do on my own time in my own home, with my own equipment. And that was a big deal back then.
You mentioned the financial crisis of 2008 as one of the catalysts to switch you in your direction. How did that create a problem that the law firm got shut down?
Well, here's the thing. By that point, I had been working for myself. So I had left the law firm to work for the production companies. And then I had left the production companies to go out on my own. And I had my own thing going. And I had strayed a little bit from the pure entertainment business. I was doing more what they call intellectual property, which in my case was trademarks. And I had acquired a pretty big client. They were involved in the gaming industry. They were a Texas-based company, and I was an independent contractor for them. And their business, we ended up having about a 12-year relationship, and their business grew. And as their business grew, they became my biggest client, and till the end, they were basically my only client. And it was a great situation for me. They were really nice people to work with, pretty lucrative. It wasn't a big time commitment in terms of work, and I was working from my house, basically. And that allowed me to learn photography, first the filmmaking and then the photography. I was able to devote time to that. And I'm not married. I don't have kids, so I didn't have that distraction. So I could really kind of throw myself when I wasn't working, which actually really wasn't very often. I mean, I had a pretty easy situation. And I really utilized that time to learn photography. I don't have any formal education. It's all basically, I don't want to say trial and error, but, trying things out. One of the other things that was happening around that time, this is the early 2000s, was the internet forums became popular. And photography websites would have a forum where users could go and post a question. And, within a few minutes, 10 people would answer that. So that was very helpful for me. I was able to learn by doing. That's a great thing about digital technology. I don't have to wait to have the film developed to see what I got. And then I could also get help on the internet. And so I was doing that while I was working, doing my law business. And then in 2008, as many people know, the whole world seemed to change in September when the Lehman Brothers crash came and then Goldman Sachs. And, we found out later that, the U.S. and the world banking system was on the verge of collapse. And so this one big client I had, their business was really affected by that. I never really found out all the details. I know they were involved in financing their gaming machines and stuff like that, but I never really found out what the particular issue was, other than, everybody was having trouble then. And what happened was the board of directors fired all the directors of the company, all the officers of the company, the people that I had been working with for almost 12 years. And within a matter of months, they had restructured the company and brought all new people in, and they cut all their outside contractors, which included me. So I went from having a pretty good situation to having basically nothing. I take responsibility. I didn't diversify my client base and all that. I'm not going to make myself wrong for that. It's basically what I did. And I spent a little bit of time the rest of that year, the end of 2008 and into early 2009, trying to, build a law practice. And the business environment was just terrible. And I didn't really know anything about marketing and all that anyway. Everything just had seemed to come to me in terms of my prior work. So I just came to that point, Douglas, where it was just like, I really, and living in California, there's a lot of kind of new age thought out there, and I had read books like Think and Grow Rich and Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow and all this other stuff. And I had also basically I had saved a bunch of money. I had paid off all my debt. I had saved some money. As I said, I wasn't married, no kids. And I just thought, I never loved being a lawyer. I had made peace with my profession, but it was never who I was. And so I came to this point in my life, and I just said, what do I want to do for the next 30, 40 years? What really excites me and what interests me? And the only thing I could think of was photography. So I made the decision, and I said, I'm gonna, and what I had been doing also, I had been thinking a little bit about this as I was going, was I started to learn product photography, commercial product photography. And I was also learning headshots, portraits and headshots. And I was pretty good at both of those things by that point. And I saw both of those as ways I could make money. Now, the one factor that I hadn't considered was, my family is from the East Coast, and my sisters were having kids, and I soon had 8 nieces and nephews that I was very close to. And so I was constantly flying back and forth from California to New York. My parents live here. They're getting a little bit older. And so I just kind of decided, if I'm going to do this, maybe I should move back, be close to the family as well. So not only did I change careers, but I changed my geographic location. So what I found out pretty quickly, Douglas, is it takes a lot more than passion and creativity to have a successful business. I didn't really have a business plan. I just thought I'm going to be a great photographer and I'm going to be discovered and people are going to just be knocking on my doors and it's all going to be wonderful. And I didn't really know anything about marketing, about sales, about promotions and all that. And I also, as I said, I had some money in the bank. And so I wasn't hungry in that way. And I kind of took the first couple of years and I got a little bit of business. I did some advertising on Google AdWords and all that, but I wasn't covering my expenses through my income from my photography. And that went on for a couple of years. I was getting business and I was learning more as I went, but I can't say I had a successful business. And at some point I realized, I really got to get on this thing about, what does it take to have a successful business? And I realized that I have to be a salesman first and a photographer second, because there's a lot of great photographers out there. Even though I was relatively close to New York City, I live about 50 minutes out. There's a lot of established studios that have long-term clients and all that in New York City. And I was kind of competing with that as well. So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I really realized, I have to learn how to market myself, and I have to learn how to do the business side of the business of photography. And so I just started with things like cold calling. I had a lot of resistance, I have to say, and I still have some resistance to this. But I realized that one thing I could do was, pick up the phone and start calling people and telling them about my business. And it wasn't easy. I had a lot of fear of rejection. I had a lot of apprehension about all that. I felt like I was bothering people. It was a difficult thing, but I managed to push through that slowly. And I generally found that my experience was pretty good. In the last few years, I've probably made thousands of cold calls and only got hung up on once or twice. Most people were very nice. They may not have been interested, but it wasn't the horrible thing I was expecting. But I did notice that I was kind of hard on myself. Even if the call went well, I would kind of beat myself up a little bit and say, well, gee, you really should have said this. You should have done that. And so I've learned to kind of moderate that as well, and that's made it a lot easier. It wasn't so much the rejection of others that was really plaguing me. It was kind of my own not being real nice to myself if things didn't go the way I thought they were supposed to. So my process with all of this has been to begin to just treat myself a little better, not be so hard on myself. And that's made it easier to take some of those actions, which are pretty, they can be pretty intimidating.
Well, let me ask you something, because photography, from the way you've explained it, is a very diverse arena of things that you can take pictures of. It would seem to me you'd have to focus to say, well, okay, I'm going to do commercial photography. I'm going to take, you said product photography, as opposed to landscapes. And I saw your picture of the New York skyline. It looks like a lightning bolt is hitting the World Trade Tower.
Yep.
So, something like that would have different monetary value, but it would be a different avenue, wouldn't it? Stuff like that would be exhibited in an art gallery versus
Right.
versus taking pictures of boxes of cereal for General Mills.
Right.
So how do you decide, which way you're going to go? Can you do both?
Well, I actually have three primary ways that I make money with my photography. It's a great question, and I think it's, I'll talk more about that right now. I was going to get to that. So the first way is the commercial product photography, and that actually includes things like some architectural photography and all that. That's primarily geared toward advertising, e-commerce websites, stuff like that. I have shot everything from cosmetics to clothing to computers to, I had one client that sold auto parts, I was photographing spark plugs and distributor caps. It's actually challenging work, to do that well. You have to know a lot about studio lighting and camera angles and all that. And that website is greatproductshots.com. In case anybody's interested, you could see some of my work there. Great Product Shots is all one word. The second way that I make money with my photography is through the headshots and portraits. Now, when I started in Los Angeles, it was mostly actor and model portfolios. And, as we said earlier, there's no shortage of actors and models out there, so it was easy to find people to practice on. And, I gave them some free photos, and they gave me the ability to practice my craft. Here on the East Coast, it's more corporate stuff. And as it turns out, some of the cold calling that I've done has been to law firms and accounting firms. And so I have actually photographed for, most law firm websites now, they have a profile page for each of the lawyers with a headshot. So I've done a lot of that now for some of the bigger firms in New York City and in New Jersey. And my tagline for that business is, I used to be a lawyer, now I shoot them. Yeah, so some of the administrative assistants laugh at that. The lawyers don't always laugh at it, but, And I will tell you this, most people are uncomfortable having their photographs taken who are not, professional models and all that. So it is helpful when I tell them, I used to be a lawyer. It kind of puts them at ease, and we can talk about their business because I understand it. And it's actually been a great experience. It's been really nice to connect with people, to see what my life might have looked like, to share my experience with them. And that work can actually be pretty lucrative. It's a lot of work. I have to basically bring a studio to their office in Manhattan and all that. But it's generally been a good experience, and I enjoy doing that. And they seem to really respond to, my story. And then the third way for me is through my fine art photography. And so for the last 3 years, I've been building a collection, a series of images, basically of the New York City skyline, and in particular, I've become known for my supermoon photos, which are photographs of the full moon over various landmarks in New York City, in particular the Statue of Liberty. I spent a lot of time, learning how to track the movement of the full moon and of the crescent moon and all that, and photographing that in relationship to the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, the World Trade Center. And in fact, I've had several of those photographs published. And one of my photos of the supermoon from November was published internationally in several newspapers where millions of people saw that photo. And that's a big deal. I found out this morning that one of my photos is on the cover of an overseas photography publication. I've had photographs published in the newspapers, on TV. I've had several of my photos shown on television now. I've won 42 awards for my fine art photography in the last 3.5 years. And so there's this third aspect, and what I do is I sell prints, and I also license my images as well. So I sell prints through galleries, I sell my prints online on my website, and I use social media a lot, including Facebook. And in fact, I sold a bunch this year on Facebook, basically through promoting my work there. But I've had to learn how to navigate that. People don't necessarily want to be sold to on Facebook, but they are very interested in engaging, and they do seem to really appreciate my photography. So that's been great. And actually through Facebook, what happened was I had a photograph of the full moon rising above the New Yorker Hotel. They have a huge neon sign on the top of the hotel that says New Yorker. It's visible from New Jersey. And I got a shot of the full moon coming up right behind it, and a whole series of images. And what I did with those photos is they got a lot of response on my Facebook page. And then what I did was I put them on the New Yorker Hotel's Facebook page. And their fans really started to respond to those photographs. And then what I did was I reached out to the person who administers the Facebook page, and I basically introduced myself and said, look, this is what I do. And I do sell prints. Would the hotel be interested in purchasing some of these photos? Well, within about 2 months, I had completed a sale. They purchased 7 of my images. They have a permanent installation now in their hotel of my work. And that's one of the oldest, most well-known hotels in New York City. And that basically came through leveraging social media.
How do you protect your property, your intellectual property? Because the people could make perfect digital copies, right?
Yep, and that is definitely an issue. The very short answer is I have to weigh the benefit of people seeing my work versus the possibility of people stealing my work. And I think it's probably the same for music and some other, artistic endeavors. So you can copyright images, and I tend to do that through registering them with the Copyright Office in Washington, D.C. through their website. But more importantly for me is I do watermark my images, and I only post, in general, very low-resolution photographs, digital files. So if they wanted to steal my image, the best they could do is probably a nice 5x7. And that's just the price of doing business. Luckily, I haven't run into that. Most people seem to be willing to pay for nice, professionally done prints, and I'll have them framed if they want them framed and all that. We also do a lot of printing now on things like acrylic and aluminum. Very kind of different, contemporary-looking product. But yeah, you're right. That's a potential challenge. So far, as I said, it hasn't been too bad for me, though. People deal with it in different ways. I'm erring on the side of visibility. I'm erring on the side of reaching a wide number of people, as opposed to being overly protective of my images. So that's where I'm at today, at least.
Just a quick thing on your fine art photography. Do you do shows, like gallery shows?
Oh yeah, I've lost count of the number of exhibitions. Again, I have a listing on my website of all my shows. It's peteralessandriaphotography.com, and I do have a separate page there with all my current exhibitions. I do galleries, I do group shows. I've shown stuff in everything from the local public library to some high-end galleries here in New Jersey. Haven't broke the gallery market in New York yet, but that's part of my strategy as well. And ultimately, I would love to have my own gallery, a place where people could come in and see my work and actually leave with a printed piece. So that's on the radar for me as well.
Well, super. Well, listen, we are out of time, unfortunately. It was a pleasure speaking with you. It was very interesting, very informative. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Best of luck with your photography. It sounds like you're doing great. It sounds like you made the transition very nicely, and this is all you do now, right? And you're earning a good living at it?
This is all I do. And I just have a whole different experience of my life, I'm up in the middle of the night taking pictures in the cold weather, and there's nothing I would rather do.
Well, that's fantastic.
So my life is very different today. I'm really grateful.
Your website is what? Tell us your website again, please.
It's Peter Alessandria Photography, and my last name is Alessandria. And actually, just all you have to do is Google my name. You'll see my website, my blog, and all that. And yeah, please check it out.
Okay, Peter. Thanks again for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Douglas. Take care.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guests, Richard Keller and Peter Alessandria. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.